Hello everyone, I'm Professor Plink. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Before we get into today's video, special shout out to my most recent super thankers, Gary Raymond 4453, Fancy Monkey Man 4139, Ben Lynn Weber 2095, JGS 1122, SBN WNC, David Budge 8359, Piao Meow Noir in a Waifu Car, Lord Ranulfer Ulfson, James Lamica, Cookie RI9PZ, and Nightwing 4. Thank you all very much for your kind support of my channel. You are the fearless fighters of fictional flotsam, helping me fortify the fortress of free thought. Thank you very much for helping me to continue to do what I do. And if you like what you see in this video and would like to help out the channel, make sure to subscribe and click the bell so you'll always be notified when new content comes out. And of course, like this video, maybe pop in a comment. All that goes a long way towards pleasing the light of my life.
The light of my life. Light of my life.
The YouTube algorithm, and keeping my channel motoring along. Now on to today's video. Today we're taking a look at a video from Alfred Kim, going by the channel name Genoarch. Kim has some questions that he claims even smart atheists can't answer. At this point, I chalk these video titles up to just being clickbaity attempts to draw in viewers, because there's no way the theists posting the questions actually think they can't be answered. Because even if they crack out a question where the correct answer is completely unknowable, saying, "I don't know," is still an answer. But titling a video, "Questions Atheists Can't Answer to My Satisfaction," is not likely to bring in the same number of viewers as a title that insists that you've got the questions that atheists can't answer. And I mean, it worked. I clicked on it and am responding to it, so the tactic works. But as for it being truth in advertising, as to whether or not Kim has the questions that I, as an atheist, can't answer, well, that remains to be seen. But let's let him get into them and see what kind of theistic questions he has for us today. So, over to you, Al.
Hey, how's it going on? Yeah, so these are some of the questions that my smart, well-educated atheist friends always cannot answer for anything because they never thought about it. Now, let me ask you those same questions. Did you create yourself? And most people say, no, I didn't create myself. Then did your parents create you? Like they designed all your body parts and designed to make you a male or a female and things like that? And they're like, no, they just bore you, right? And they just bore you, okay?
If that is going to be what you mean by made, meaning intentionally designed, then no. I didn't make myself, nor did my parents, nor did anyone as far as I'm concerned. My parents made me insofar as they provided the genetic material that they chose to combine in order to produce me, and that my mother gestated me inside of her womb until I'd formed to the point of viability, and then I was born. My parents quite literally made me, but they didn't design me. No one did as far as I'm concerned, because I don't believe intelligent design is a real thing when it comes to biological life forms.
Now, did their grandparents and parents all the way up to the first Adam and Eve per se, did they create you?
Okay, we get it. We all know where you're going with this. Get to the point.
Did they program and create you? And no, they didn't, right? Now, so what do you believe? They believe no God and they believe in evolution. So you believe in evolution. You believe you came from monkeys or something like that, or some other animals that evolved into some other.
We did not evolve from monkeys. We evolved from apes. Apes are not monkeys. Monkeys evolved from prosimians during the Oligocene epoch, about 24 million years ago. Apes evolved from catarrhines in Africa during the Miocene epoch, which took place right after the Oligocene epoch. So apes and monkeys' common ancestry diverged something like 30 million years ago. That's more than enough time for you to understand the difference between apes and monkeys. Oh, and we didn't just evolve from apes, we are apes. Homo sapiens are included in the classification of great apes. There are 4 types of great apes: the orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans.
And these originally came from a small animal, like a microscopic germ or something, like very simple organisms, right? And they just most people believe. And then where do these simple organisms that are more complex than any machinery in this world, where did they come from?
Not only is this an answerable question, I'm frankly getting a little tired of answering it. I don't know that I've ever responded to a Questions for Atheists video that did not contain this particular question. Basically, you're asking, where did the earliest life come from if it wasn't spontaneously created by God with his God magic? Well, there's a number of secular answers to this. Answer 1, abiogenesis, the spontaneous formation of single-celled organisms through chemical interactions in the early days of the Earth. We know this to be a real possibility. We know that simple elements, under the proper conditions, can become amino acids. We know amino acids can form into RNA, ribonucleic acid. We know that RNA can become DNA under the right conditions. And from DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, we get life. So then answer 2 from a secular standpoint, panspermia. The panspermia hypothesis, a philosophical thought that life migrates naturally through space, states that the seeds of life exist all over the universe and can be propagated through space from one location to another. This theory posits that a meteor crash or the accumulation of space dust onto Earth could have brought these already formed microorganisms to Earth. Answer 3.
The Jatrovatic people of Wildvodel 6 firmly believed that the entire universe was in fact sneezed out of the nose of a being called the Great Green Arkle Seizure.
And you have to believe further on that there is this male and female, and trees that bear seeds and fruits, right? So you have to think, well then this germ, one day have to decide, you know what, I'm gonna separate and create a new being, and this new being is gonna be female, and I'm gonna have sex with it to procreate new babies, like with eggs or whatever, okay? And you have to be able to divide your body and have the ability to create and design woman parts, okay? And to create, even to change your own body to make sperm cells or seeds or whatever. And you have to perfectly create it to create new living creatures that are totally not you. You're not your father, okay? Your father is not you. Your father is not even your grandpa. Each have an individual own mind, and it's different.
And that is the beauty of sexual reproduction. The fact that I am not my father is specifically because life evolved to require male and female unions for reproduction. Asexual reproduction would only create an exact copy of the original life form because it would be pure replication of that creature's DNA. By combining two different genetic codes, it allows for a species' growth and diversification of life. Now, no, the microorganisms themselves didn't decide to become sexually dimorphic. It was an evolutionary adaptation. And it wasn't like it happened early on. The earliest life came about on Earth about 3.5 billion years ago. Separate sexes and sexual reproduction didn't evolve as a trait until about 2 billion years ago. So there was only single-sex organisms engaging in asexual reproduction for about 1.5 billion years. It took a while for the adaptation of separate sexes to come into effect. And when it did, boy howdy. I mean, look what happened. The first eukaryotes to engage in sex were single-celled protists, similar to the earliest life forms 1.5 billion years earlier, which were also single-celled organisms. But once that became the norm for reproduction, the diversification and evolution of life took off. That probably wouldn't have happened had all life retained the less efficient and less transformative asexual reproduction. But I could explain this to you all day and it wouldn't make a dent so long as you keep insisting that there had to be some kind of intentionality behind it all. You keep asking, did the germ decide to evolve? Where's the mind that decided to do all of this? Who chose for life to come into being? No one. No mind. No choice. No intentionality. The fact that life tends to be more complex than non-life is not an indication of intentionality. The basic laws of physics and the four fundamental forces of the universe insist on increasing levels of complexity. A planet is more complex than random floating space dust, but because of gravity, that space dust coalesces into a more complex astrological body. Totally naturally. Elements are more complex than individual atoms, but because of the nuclear force, those atoms bond together and it results in the formation of elements. Those elements form chemical bonds that create molecules. Those molecules interact with other molecules to form compounds. Those compounds interact with each other in a variety of ways, studied through chemistry, that cause all sorts of effects, like, for instance, the existence of life. There does not need to be any intentionality behind any of it. Those original fundamental forces of the universe may very well be natural forces with no intentionality behind them at all. It may not be possible for a physical universe to exist without them. Complexity is a natural state. It can happen all on its own.
So, and you have to believe that all these things came by itself. And that is totally a belief, it's a religion. Atheism is a religion. You need faith to believe in it.
No. Because nothing you've been talking about up till now has been atheism. You've been addressing secular hypotheses about the origin of life. You've been discussing evolution and abiogenesis. None of this is synonymous with atheism, which is nothing more and nothing less than not believing in God. Atheists can believe practically anything about the beginnings of life and its propagation on this planet, so long as none of it posits a creator God. Atheists could believe that we are all the dream of a giant turtle floating in space. Atheists could believe we are an advanced computer simulation and we're nothing more than binary code NPCs that only think we're physical beings. Atheists could believe in life-giving, universe-belching unicorns from the 8th dimension. So long as they don't believe in a God doing it, then it's atheism. Believing in evolution? That is not a religion. Hell, most Christians accept the reality of evolution. It is not a position based on faith. It is accepting the incontrovertible mountains of evidence that clearly establish that evolution was how the sexes developed and how life grew and diversified over the millennia.
And then another question I'll ask, well, there are many different languages in the world, like they say like 10,000 or more languages, and even many are disappeared because they conquered each other, big countries and big countries. And even in China, like there's Shanghai City and Suzhou, it's very, very close, okay? It's about 2-hour distance. And that language is totally different. And I'm Korean, and next to Japan, and even Korea had like 3 different languages before, as far as the history goes. And China has many, many hundreds of different languages as history goes before, and many got deleted. You have to see, hey, if we came from one organism, like evolution, right? Where all these different languages that are totally different come from?
At least with the last question, the origin of life question, it is not known to a certainty. So even though there are certain secular answers to it, you could claim that atheists don't have the definitive answer to it. But then, of course, neither do theists. They just think they do. But this one, how did language diverge? We absolutely know about linguistic drift. This isn't even complicated. Even in our modern world, which is so massively connected by way of telecommunication technology, it's easy to see how language drifts. People in one community develop their own distinct dialect, accent, and terminology. I mean, look at the United Kingdom, for example. Not exactly a huge place compared to countries like the United States, Canada, China, or Russia, and highly, highly interconnected. And yet there are almost 40 different dialects in the UK that sound totally different from each other, and in many cases use different spellings and word structure. I mean, just try to get a Scottish person to say purple burglar alarm without botching it up.
Purple burglar alarm. 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 Burglar. Purple burglar.
And let's look at the example that you gave, Shanghai City, and some other place. I don't know. I listened to it over and over, and I couldn't make out the other location you said.
There's Shanghai City,
But you said they were 2 hours distance. And I'm assuming that means by driving or by train. Okay, well, imagine that distance back at a time where mass modern transit wasn't available. What are we talking about here? 100 miles apart? How long would that trip have taken on horseback in ancient times? Under the best of conditions, it's probably a 2 or 3 day trip. Round trip, you're looking at about a week total. Now, sure, they might have engaged in such trips for the purposes of occasional trade or diplomacy, but that's definitely enough of a distance that they couldn't easily and regularly interact with each other. And so, over time and successive generations, their language diverged. Because language always evolves. Even within a singular culture, from one generation to the next, language changes to the point where the older generation can have trouble understanding the younger ones.
Confused. Is the way I ate this up a compliment because it was nom nom delish and had you gagged?
Exactly. We love you down, Mr. Ben. You're so father, period.
So, you take a community, separate it from another community by enough distance to make regular interaction unfeasible, add multiple generation, hundreds of years of linguistic evolution that takes a different path from the linguistic evolution of their neighboring communities, and you eventually wind up with a totally different language. I mean, we have historical data that shows that all of the Romance languages, Italian, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Romanian, Catalan, they all evolved from Latin, as well as Latin borrowed terms blending into many other languages, such as English. We know this happened. This all happened in the last few thousand years, so we have direct evidence of that language evolution. It didn't happen because of a Tower of Babel. It happened because language changes over time, and when groups are separated enough, their languages diverge. This is well understood. Now, I may be a master debater, but I'm not a particularly cunning linguist. But even I knew this. This was not even close to a difficult question. You need to do better, Al.
Anyway, these questions, when I ask my friends, their response is, I don't know. And they're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. And I ask, like, do you want to come to church? And do you want to know about God? And they were like, most of them, they don't want to go to church and accept God. Because, you know what, believing in God, they think it's going to take away their freedom. Because when you believe in God, oh, now you got to read Bible, now you got to pray, now you got to seek God, and nobody want to do that.
I spent 30 some odd years of my life learning about God. I think I've done quite enough of that. Though I do have to say that I've probably learned more about my former religion, Catholicism and Christianity in general, since becoming an atheist than I ever did when I was in the religion. Learning a lot about Christianity that the faith leaders didn't particularly want to talk about, the skeletons in the proverbial closet, if you will, is one of the things that caused me to not believe anymore. In fact, according to Pew Research, atheists tend to be among the most knowledgeable about religion in general, coming in second only behind Jewish respondents. And when questions were specifically asked about the Bible, atheists tended to score as good or slightly better than even the Christian respondents. That's probably because a large portion of atheists come from a religious background to begin with. So when you say that all of your atheist friends, which I totally believe that you actually have, seem to know nothing about religion, despite living in a highly Christian nation where it permeates a large swath of our culture, films, stories, laws, and activities, well, I find that a little hard to swallow. And then, seriously, ditch the whole you don't want to go to church because you just want to sin bullshit. It won't get you anywhere with the very atheists you claim you're trying to talk to. Now, is there a question coming anytime soon, or are you just going to keep assuming the sinful motivations of atheists for not accepting your reasoning?
And And this is a huge risk for you to take, not believing in God. There's a big consequence. Because you didn't create yourself. And God said, well, I created you. And I created you for a purpose, to serve God and to love your brothers and sisters and your neighbor as yourself. But you didn't do anything for me. And when God says, what are you going to say? You're going to be speechless. You're going to have nothing to say. Well, I didn't know. Well, is that going to work?
So after a lot of sermonizing and insisting that God must be real, this was the next closest thing to an actual question from Al. And while I'm sure he meant it as a rhetorical question, I'm going to go ahead and answer it anyway. So, the obvious answer, for starters, is that I don't believe I ever will stand in front of God, because I don't believe such a being exists. But on the off chance that God does exist, and the even more off chance that it's the Christian God, seriously, I'd be more likely to believe I'd find myself standing in front of Cthulhu at this point than Yahweh. But if I did, and Yahweh said that he put me on earth to love my neighbor as myself, and to do good works to make the world a better place and all that, I would say, well, I did. Or at least I tried to. I became a much more caring and empathetic person once I stopped believing in God. I know Christians like to think that they have a monopoly on caring for other people. After all, it says in Matthew 22:39, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." Even when talking about the people that Christians want to strip basic civil rights away from, like LGBTQ people, or anyone seeking to affirm their bodily autonomy by seeking to terminate a pregnancy, Christians will often repeat the edict that they love the sinner but hate the sin. But the reality is something much different. Christianity, in fact, insists on apathy towards your fellow man. Let me explain that. Now, who is the judge who judges sinners harshly and sends them to hell?
You didn't serve me. I don't know you. Who are you? Get out. You go to where I send all the unbelievers of God into hell with the devil and the disobedient ones, all in hell.
You said it yourself right there when you were speaking as God, where I send the unbelievers into hell. So God sends the unbelievers to hell. Well, a cornerstone of Christian belief is that God is good all the time. Everything God does is right and just and good. So every single person that gets condemned to hell for all eternity, well, that is the judgment and will of God. And so it must be good. It must be righteous. It must be a good thing that there are people right now, at this very moment, burning in eternal anguish and torment. The smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever, and they will have no relief day or night. This is the word of God. This is the decision of God, and it must therefore be good. As a Christian, you can tell yourself that you have sympathy for the condemned, but at the end of the day, you have to believe that all of those people burning forever and ever is a good thing. So I reject that Christians, any Christian who accepts the idea of hell and eternal punishment for unbelievers, or for any sinners at all, actually love thy neighbor as themselves. They can't. They can't truly have empathy for people whose torment they have to view as a positive thing. So I do care about my fellow man. I do try to do my best to improve the lives of those around me. I do what I can to alleviate the suffering of others and to be a positive influence to everyone I can. And that should be enough for God. Living by my conscience and trying to live a good life should be enough. And by the way, the Pope agrees with me on this. Back in 2015, Pope Francis said that God opens heaven's doors to non-believers who obey their conscience. And according to Matthew 18:18, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So even if Yahweh does exist, the leader of his church has decreed it so that non-believers can go to heaven if they are good people. Additionally, if I was standing before God and he was asking me why I didn't believe in him, I'll say it's because he didn't provide me with enough reason to believe in him. And he created me, so he put into me my skeptical nature. And since we don't choose what we're convinced by, it was God's fault that I didn't believe, not mine. Much like he hardened Pharaoh's heart to not let the Jews go, he hardened mine to not believe in him. So, like all things would be if he actually existed, it would be God's fault. And those were Alfred's questions even smart atheists can't answer. And I don't want to critique him too harshly, but frankly, this video was pretty lousy. I mean, in the end, we only actually got 3 questions out of it. 1, where did life come from? 2, why are there so many different religions? And 3, what are you going to say when you stand in front of God? And this was an 11-minute video. Well, that's because there was only about a minute of asking questions and about 10 minutes of evangelizing and sermonizing. Most of which I cut out because it was meaningless drivel. I get the feeling that Alfred really just made this video to ramble about how crazy it is that anyone doesn't believe in God, and you better start or else you're going to go to hell. Well, you'll forgive me if I remain unimpressed by your religious saber rattling. And next time you intend to come with questions for atheists, maybe try more actual questions and less assuming of motives, less fear-mongering, and less pointless proselytizing. And so that is where we'll leave things for today. So thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to like this video and comment, subscribe, so you'll always be notified when new content comes out. Until next time, I'm Professor Plink, reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.